All right, so this is a bit of a change of pace because I'm not a developer, so some of the technical stuff that's just been going on, I didn't know much of what was going on. Instead, I'm going to be talking a bit about some do's and don'ts for marketers like me, working with developers, asking for help, and yeah, that intersection and collaboration. And I'm just going to go through, first of all, why this talk, why it's important, and why I think it matters a lot, especially today. Then I'm just going to dive into some do's and don'ts that I've split into some different kind of topics. And then I just have three key takeaways in the end if you're a bit tired and just want me to wrap it all up nicely. So first of all, who am I? My name is Lars. I'm a team lead in something called Team MAD in our marketing team in Umbraco. And it works with marketing, automation, data, and design. So some of the more technical parts of our marketing goes through our team. I grew up in the agency world. So I joined Umbraco 3 years ago, but I've been working in agencies before then. So my do's and don'ts kind of works across. So it doesn't matter if you're in an agency or in-house. I've seen these things happen, both sides of the table. And then I'm always looking at shiny new tech and including our marketing tech stack. How can we do more integration? So of course that will mean that I work closely with developers to integrate all of these. So why do I think this is actually something that's worth talking about and having you listen to me for half an hour? Well, first of all, the reputation of marketers might not be the best when it comes to developers. And if you don't believe me, I've been given permission by Sebastian, my colleague, to send you this. And this is a random Slack message I got a while back where he was basically saying I was doing some dark magic because I like SEO. And it kind of shows the reputation that I've seen that like marketers are maybe some cowboys that just do weird things on the website and break the nice things that a developer has built. So there's a bit of reputation, and I can only say I agree a lot of times that a lot of marketers it's been the Wild West previously, and that has kind of hurt the reputation. So we have some stuff to do there. Secondly, it feels like we live on different planets. So the home of developers on one planet are very much focused on creating stuff. So creating new websites, creating beautiful design and interactions and UI and all those things, where we as marketers, we focus a lot on growing stuff. So getting more traffic, getting more leads, more revenue. So it's more of it's a clash of what's our objectives in our day-to-day work and what we focus on, where it's just not the same. And that's really important to understand. And then lastly, I would just say that my job wouldn't be possible if I couldn't get help from developers, because SEO used to be just spamming a bunch of keywords and writing some long text. Well, today there's something like Core Web Vitals, which are like very technical and can only be handled by a developer to make sure you rank higher. And if you want to do email marketing, well, people expect personalization today, and it should be integrated with all the data you have and all your systems. So it can be with the first name and their order value and all those kind of things, so they know exactly what's going on. And then data analytics and I'll just like you have server-side tracking, you have these cookie pop-ups, you have everything where it's just ITP, GDPR. There's a ton of different things that you really need to work together with developers. So as a marketer, you can't really do your job unless you work with developers. And as we've seen, they live on a different planet. So how do we make this work? And what I've done today is I've split these do's and don'ts up into a few different sections. And the first one I have is why. Why do this? Whenever you hand over a task that comes from me to a developer that needs to help you with something, then like I always start with why. And what you should not do is just hand over a task as if the purpose is obvious. Like it might be obvious to you. You might be able to hand it off to someone else in my team. I can do that with a task because they will understand. But we focus on growing, so we know these things, where a developer won't necessarily just understand why they should spend time on doing this when they can spend time on creating stuff like they want to do. So what you should do is start with why. If you've read the book, seen the TED Talk, you know what it's about, but start with why. And I like to do it on a fact-based level. I've seen that really work. So an example with these Core Web Vitals, which we needed our developer to help us out with. Well, then I came to him and said, like, on Umbraco.com, 50% of our traffic comes from search engines like Google, and 40% of our revenues come through those visitors. So this is really business critical. Google has officially announced it's going to be part of their algorithm. So if you don't live up to them, you'll lose traffic and you'll lose revenue. And lastly, you can already look at the Lighthouse reports and see exactly how we're ranking already and what we need to look at and fix. So already getting that up front, making it very crystal clear that like there's a why to this. It's just not me going like, oh, I want better SEO and not any explanation. No, go with a more clear why and include as many facts and reports and whatever you have, because then it's more clear for a developer, okay, what's going on here, because you're coming with something from a different planet. So when you hand it over, well, then they will better understand why they're supposed to be doing this or helping you with this. And then the next set of do's and don'ts are, what are we doing? So like, what's the task actually? And first off, don't just send a link, like in this case, to Google's documentation and tell them, oh, I want you to do that. Because that's just, yeah, I'm sure we've all done that, but it will just happen that a developer will go, I can maybe Google my way to this, or like Stack Overflow, or they'll be like, oh, I have no idea what you're asking me to do, and you'll already get off on a bad foot or like a bad standing because they will have to go a bunch of back and forth. So instead, what you should do is you should educate yourself. Like with something like the Core Web Vitals, look at the documentation, look at the Lighthouse reports. I went through Umbraco.com, the entire website, looked at all our different document types and looked at all the different sections of it where we would need to fix something. And then I wrote that down, like, we need to fix this, we need to fix this, we need to fix this because of this and this and this, and here's where you can check it. It meant that I knew better what I was asking someone else to do. So by educating myself, I know what's going on under the hood, but I also know what I'm asking a developer to do. And like, is it a tiny task that might take a few hours, or is it a project that takes months? Like, because I educate myself, I can better know exactly what I'm asking someone else to do. And I think that's really important. And also, just after you've done your research, you should not assume that a developer knows all the details about it, because it sounds like a developer thing. Like Core Web Vitals or server-side tracking, well, I'm sure they'll know exactly what it works. No, like all developers won't know everything about all there is to web development. That's just a fact. So don't assume that they know it all, but instead make sure that you share what kind of research you did and what you educated yourself in. And if they know it already, perfect. If not, then you just help them, give them links to resources or whatever it is. And that's also my next do, is like give a detailed specification of what you want to have happen. So maybe it's server-side tracking, if that's an example. Well, what kind of systems do you use? How do you want to handle it? Where, like all those details really show that you've done your homework, and you can hand them over to a developer so they'll better know also where to look and educate themselves if they're to do this task. And here I just want to add a life hack of using screen recordings. Funny story, a few months ago, we had an issue somewhere on Umbraco.com, and I reached out to our developer and wrote him like, I'm seeing some issues with this kind of filtering. And he was like, he wrote back like, yeah, sure, I can see what you mean. I'll try and fix it. In the meantime, before I saw that message, I was just making a quick screen recording where I explained, like showing him exactly what I saw as an issue. And then when he saw the video, it was like, oh, that was a different issue than what I found. So just going that extra mile and giving a bit of extra details to something actually meant that he could fix 2 bugs instead of just one, and then we would have to fix the other one later. So using screen recordings is really, really good. Also because you might not have the correct vocabulary when you have to explain something technical to a developer. So showing what you mean on a screen or whatever really helps a lot communicate and get your point across. Then the next one is how. So we've covered the why, we've covered the what, which I think are the essential ones, but we also have to do like, how do we get there? And I think this one comes back to some of the other ones in the what's, is like, don't be vague. Like just saying, I think you should do something in this direction. No. Instead, again, you've educated yourself. Include, whenever you ask someone to do it and how it should be done, include an explanation of how you think it could be solved. And the could is very important here because you're not the expert, the developers, otherwise you wouldn't ask them to do it if you could do it yourself. But showing that you've thought about what could happen, will also help you actually. And a few years ago, we changed to a different marketing automation system at Umbraco, and we were facing some integrations we had to do, and I was reaching out to our cloud team. And when I was doing that and making this specification of what I wanted them to do, I realized that instead of just one API call between everything, because I don't know much about APIs, it had to be 5 different ones, where it had to be in a certain order to work. And the values that they needed was not the ones I thought they needed. So custom values, they needed an ID number instead of the value name. So all of a sudden, just because I went through like how it could be solved and looked at the documentation, I could instead look at, okay, you'll need these values, you'll need these values. So again, it increases the quality of the brief you can give to a developer. And it also shows that you've really done the groundwork. It might not be the right way that you suggest. It rarely is for me. I think I've hit that once, and every other time there's been a better way to do it. But it shows that you've made some thoughts about it, and they can see your thought process as well and come back with some constructive feedback on. And that also comes to the next one, that you should not believe that your way is the only way. Your task is a marketing task when you're handing it over to a developer, but that doesn't mean like you can't do it yourself. So you need someone from this different planet to do it for you. Well, if you think you know the answer already, then you should probably work on that planet, because that's just not how it works. So don't be naive. Don't be anything like that. Be humble and come up with, say, this is my suggestion. I think this could work, but what do you think? Because what I've seen is that once you do that and once you embrace these different perspectives, even if it's a purely marketing task, a developer will get you this different perspective, and that might actually end up bringing you closer to an even better solution than initially thought of. Another example of Umbraco.com is that we wanted to store cookies that showed where a user came from. So we could use magic strings in Umbraco Forms and send that over to marketing automation systems or CRMs whenever someone submitted a form. And as our developer was looking at it, she went back to me and said, you're looking at this as if you want to use first touch attribution. Why not use last touch attribution? And that's something that is a purely marketing perspective of like, how do you do attribution modeling? But she made some great arguments that made me change my mind, because she looked at it from a different perspective and a more technical way. And what if they delete cookies? What if they do this? And we won't know for sure if it's the first one, if they keep using Safari and everything. So in the end, we actually changed the way we were doing things. And she made me change my mind on my subject, or like what I'm supposed to be a specialist at. And that just showed that like, if you come in with an open mind, a developer is not just someone who just writes some code and go done. If you have these clear why and what, and like put in the effort to educate yourself and know what they're going to be working on, you can have some really cool conversations and ultimately leading to much better solutions for your customers, or in this case, us, because we did it on Umbraco.com. Then, of course, we have this when, and that's always going to be the one where, of course, as a marketer, I'll think my task will have to be top priority, because all developers will just be sitting around waiting for me to ask them to do stuff for me. That's just not how it works. And please don't be like that, because that's just not how it works. Like you can't just expect someone to throw everything they have, even if you've done this homework of why and what and everything. Like it will still need to fit in. And that's why you need to set realistic expectations. And a key to that is understanding how developers work, how others work, like how do they structure their work. At Umbraco, our development teams run in sprint cycles. So a sprint, they have 3 sprints of 2 weeks in a cycle, so 6 weeks in total. And I've actually, in my team, I've synced that up. So we also work in the same sprint cycle. So we plan our tasks the same way. And that means I always know when our development team is finishing up a cycle or finishing up a sprint. And that means I will have much better timing and understanding of when they'll probably have time to add something to a sprint, and when they'll be buried and like we need to finish stuff up at the end of a cycle. Or like I won't ask 3 days into a completely new cycle, oh, I need you to do this for me tomorrow. No, when I know when they start a new cycle, I'll already, before their sprint planning, I'll ask them, hey, I have this task, I would love to have it worked at. Can you look at it at your next sprint planning and let me know when you're working at it? That also means that they can come back to me and say, this will be looked at in sprint 170. Well, then I know if I have some follow-up task on my end, well, then I can A, help test more on that later, but B, I can also make sure that I can do some follow-up tasks the week after. So when I know it's done. So it helps me plan my work, but it also means that I'm showing this appreciation and understanding of other people's time. And I think that's a big part. I don't know of many marketing departments that work with sprints in the same way. But since we changed to it in my team, I've seen it makes it much smoother because we can speak the same language, so to say, on when stuff is getting planned and when it's not and when it's being worked on and everything. So it just makes it much easier to work together. So no matter if your development team works with sprints or anything, ask them, figure out how they work, how do they prefer to get tasks, so you can better time it in with their workflow, so they know when a new task might come in for you. It's also easier for them to plan it in. It just makes a much smoother collaboration. And then don't flag all your tasks as top priority. Like, not all emails are important, and not all of your tasks should be like everything is just burning. If it is, then you should have a different way of handling that. But don't assume that like you can just put everything on top of a backlog or whatever, and then they'll just work on it immediately. No, instead have a clear process for handing over tasks, and especially have a way of you showing how stuff should be ranked. So because our team works a lot in the technical side of our marketing, we have a lot of tasks in different backlogs and different development teams in Umbraco, and all of them will have some kind of priority. So from 1 to 10, that's the simple system we have. So whenever the development teams are looking at all their tasks, they'll look at, okay, what kind of marketing tasks did Lars ask me to do? Well, then they'll know how I rank each of them. They'll all have this why and what, so they can make their own decisions on which ones they think are most important. But if one task is regarding SEO, another one is email marketing, and a third one is A/B testing or whatever, then it can be hard for them to compare. But I know, because it's stuff from my planet, I know which one of them should be fixed before the other ones, which one should have priority. So in that way, I can show which priority they have, and a development team will go, okay, Lars thinks this is the most important thing we can do for him. He's shown the homework on how big of a task it should be, how it could be solved. They can evaluate how long it's going to take and then put it in accordingly in their planning. So I really think having this clear process has also helped out a lot when working with developers. And I think we're going to our last one, and which is who will test. So once we're done with stuff and we just push live on a Friday afternoon, who's going to check that it doesn't break stuff? And don't leave testing to the developer. This was a task you asked for help, and now you're just going to leave them with doing all the work and also making sure it all works and rolling back or whatever it means. Sure, they'll have to test at some degree in their code or whatever it is, but you can't just leave it all on them. You should take ownership of the task, and that means that you should help test in any way you can. And I think an important part of this is, especially if you're doing something like working in some of your marketing systems like Google Analytics or a marketing automation tool, or on your website even, like I would bet that any marketer visits their company website more than the developers do. So you'll know more, like if they implement something with image sizes or a new layout on a document type, well, then you'll immediately be able to see if something looks off, if it broke something, where a developer might just look at the isolated changes they make and go like, okay, this works. But then if a video stops playing completely because something broke, well, then you can see that because you're more accustomed to it. So please help your developers test it so they don't feel alone in this process. And what I've done a lot and found very helpful is to let them know exactly when you will be ready to help them. So say, whenever you have something ready on your staging environment, let me know, and then I'll have a look. And if you have this planning already in the when, where you know which sprint they're working on it, well, then you can already set aside time to help test in that sprint, because then you know they're working here. And you can see that this all ties together, that then you can help test. They're not alone. You can do the real world testing, and the developer can do testing of their own code. And it will you'll be able to use your skills in a good way, and the developers will be able to use their skills in a good way. And next one is, this is probably obvious for any developers looking at this, but don't test in production environments if at all possible. I know there are situations where it's not possible, but just don't test in production environments. What I would say instead is, you as a marketer should create test environments for your developers in the systems you're using. And if I elaborate a bit on stuff like, if we use Google Analytics today, and whenever we need some new kind of data to be pushed in, I've created a test property specifically for our development team. I've given them access. I've shown them with screen recordings. I love screen recordings, how they can work, how they can test, and how they can check all the data. And then whenever they're doing anything on their test environments, they only send data to that test property, because then we know that we can control and it doesn't dilute all the real data we have, but we can keep it over there. We can actually do a live test of it on development environments. So we can see that, okay, it's all working. Now we're ready to push the code to a live environment. Then at the same time, we push to a live property in Google Analytics. The same goes for email marketing system. If you have a live list of your main subscribers, well, then you can make a new list specifically for your developers, so they can just add subscribers or do whatever they want to on that specific list. So see where you can actually isolate these things, so it's not being pushed to something live, and then if they have to roll back, you might hurt some live data or dilute it or whatever it is. So please don't think of that as being something only developers do, of having multiple environments. See if you can do it yourself as a marketer. Because it really helps and works a lot. And it also means that a developer will be more comfortable pushing changes earlier, because they know it won't affect something live. So it's easier to test, easier to get fixed if anything needs fixing, and easier and faster to get to live. And that was actually the do's and don'ts I had time for today in this presentation. So I'll just share some final thoughts I have. And first of all, get to know the other planet. Go visit. I know Corona might make that difficult, but know how developers work, know how they think, listen in on discussions they are having at lunch or whatever it is, or like if there's something new, cool, then ask questions. I've many times at Umbraco just sat down at lunch with someone from our development team and just listened in on their conversations, because they might be talking gibberish half the time, but then I can be the person of going, I want to know more, and like, do I understand this right? And ask those stupid questions. But ultimately, a lot of times, at least what I've seen, is developers love talking about their work and new tech or whatever it is. So if you ask these stupid questions, they'll be happy to elaborate and explain in a language you might understand. And it also means that you'll have a better insight into how your developers are working and what their challenges are and what's the new cool thing in their world. So you kind of get an understanding there. And also with how they plan their work and everything. So you like get closer to your developers, so you know these things, because there are some key differences that you need to be aware of. And it makes work easier if you have a better relationship with everyone. That goes for everything in the world. The second one is, I've said this a lot of times, but do your homework. It might be developer tasks that you're handing over, and like it might be very heavy integrations, APIs, whatever. But don't expect them to do all the work. Educate yourself, like look at how stuff done and like understand what's going on underneath the hood. Because if you do that, you've already shown your commitment that you also do your homework before you hand something off to someone else and literally ask them for help. That's what you're doing. So like you should at least be able to do as much as you can with your skills. And at some point you'll be, I don't know more. I can't, like, this is above my head. Then you can hand it off because you've done the effort and you've shown the effort, and that goes a long way towards a better result. And the last one is keep on learning. I believe that the time of just being a specialist in just marketing and not knowing a lot about what developers are doing is gone. I think a hybrid marketer is coming very soon, where you would need to know at least the very basics of HTML, CSS, JavaScript, but also APIs and like more in-depth, how do you handle headless and everything as a marketer, and indexing with Google. Like it's all getting a lot more complicated and technical. I love it. I'm embracing it fully, but it means that you really have to be a great copywriter or something to not understand HTML or something. So you need to level up your ground technical vocabulary, if you could put it like that. So you have to keep on learning as a marketer because everything is getting more technical. And as I said in the beginning, I wouldn't be able to do my job. Probably I wouldn't get the results I'm doing if it wasn't for all the help from my awesome colleagues in our development teams. And with that, I think I am done. So I don't know if there's any questions. Otherwise, you can connect with me on email or whatever you want to do after this. I'd love to have a chat.
Well, we're back, and thank you very much for your talk. As a developer, thank you. Thank you for thinking along with us and trying to get your ways of working shared with all around the world. Same thanks from a lot of other developers from the chat. So you're doing a good job. You already have some job offerings to teach other marketeers, and so you're doing great.
Oh, you got my email, so you can just let me know.
Yes. All offers can go to his email. Let's go a few moments back into your presentation. At some point you mentioned just make screen recordings of things when you want to ask the developer to do something. Do you have a particular screen recorder software that you recommend for doing this? Because I understand that for a lot of non-technical persons, screen recording is creepy or
in Umbraco and our marketing team, we all use something called Loom, Loom, and it's just a Chrome plugin that you can click and then say go with recording, and you can. It shows your camera in the bottom, and then you can just browse around and show what you mean with everything. We use that for everything, like internal teaching in our marketing team, but also for specifications, bug reports, all those things, because just you don't have the necessary vocabulary all the time to speak developerish. So showing it what you mean, then you might not need to know document types, compositions, all those things, but you could just show what you mean, and they'll obviously be able to see, okay, this is what you mean. So that's the system we use. The free version has a 5-minute limit on the videos you can do, but otherwise you can upgrade and pay for it. That's what we're doing.
All right. Well, thank you. I also really liked how your tips could also work the other way around. They're generic enough to work for any kind of team. I mean, if you put all the effort into thinking along with your development team, the development team can also do the same to you when they drop something in your lab to fix up. So, for example, if you have a problem with something, let the others or help the person that is supposed to be able to solve it for you. Think along with them. Give them maybe a could have solution, as you mentioned.
And as you said, it can go both ways. Like, I'm just looking at it from my perspective as a marketer, but of course with project managers or whatever it is, it works. And I've also seen that like having this open mind and approach also means that sometimes the developers will come to me like, okay, I want to have data on how do our users use our menu navigation, for example. Well, then I can help them. How could we figure out how to improve it and the UI, UX? So it leads to some really fun discussions and solutions ultimately, because we all learn from each other. And I think that's very important today.
Yeah. You also mentioned that your marketing sprints are synchronized with your developer sprints. Are those developers just to get the picture? Are those developers that work on the Umbraco CMS, or is it a dedicated team for Umbraco.com or whatever websites you have to perform marketing on?
We have different teams. So we have all the normal CMS and cloud teams and all those development teams. They run the same schedule on cycles, but we also have an internal development teams that handle our websites like Umbraco.com, Umbraco Code Garden sites, and whatever it is, like our marketing sites. So we have different teams that I can go to, but a lot of it will be to our internal team working on our website, but sometimes I'll need data from our cloud platform, for example. So I'll also reach out to them, and knowing their sprint cycle and schedule is the same as everyone else's and as the one I've adapted, well, then I know when I can reach out to them.
Exactly. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. Hopefully you made the world a little bit better today.
I hope so. Thank you.